Welcome to Phrase by Phrase, where we are studying the Bible one phrase at a time. And today we are looking at James chapter 2, verses 5 through 7. So James is continuing his argument about giving special treatment or preference to the wealthy. And so he says, "Listen, my beloved brethren, did not God choose the poor of this world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom, which he promised to those who love him? But you have dishonored the poor man. Is it not the rich who oppress you and personally drag you into court? Do they not blaspheme the fair name by which you have been called?" Remember, they were being persecuted because of their faith, and many of them were being persecuted by the wealthy. So that's why he's making that statement. And so he's saying some pretty drastic statements here, really about both the poor and the rich. And it sounds like he's anti-rich, but that's not really the case. These are generalizations, and it happens to be the wealthy who are oppressing them. So he's not saying that all poor people are righteous, because there are many poor people who are evil, and he's not saying that all rich people are evil, because there are many rich people who are saved. But generally, the poor are more likely to come to Christ. Monica Helwig, in a Christianity Today article, gave 10 reasons why the poor are more likely to come to Christ. And here's what she said. Number 1, the poor know they are in urgent need of redemption. 2, the poor know not only their dependence on God and on powerful people, but also their interdependence with one another. 3, the poor rest their security not on things, but on people. 4, the poor have no exaggerated sense of their own importance and no exaggerated need of privacy. 5, the poor expect little from competition and much from cooperation. 6, the poor can distinguish between necessities and luxuries. 7, the poor can wait because they have acquired a kind of dogged patience born of acknowledged dependence. 8, the fears of the poor are more realistic and less exaggerated because they already know that no one can survive great suffering and want. 9, when the poor, they know they can survive great suffering and want. 9, when the poor have the gospel preached to them, it sounds like good news and not like a threat or a scolding. And 10, the poor can respond to the call of the gospel with a certain abandonment and uncomplicated totality because they have so little to lose and are ready for anything. Generally, the rich are more likely not to come to Christ, as a general statement, and Paul tells us why. In 1 Timothy 5, chapter 6, verses 5 through 10, Paul wrote, "And constant friction between men of depraved mind and depraved of the truth, who suppress that godliness is a means of gain. But godliness actually is a means of great gain when accompanied by contentment. For we have brought nothing into this world, so we cannot take anything out of it. If we have food and covering, with these we shall be content. But those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a snare and many foolish and harmful desires, which plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all sorts of evil, and some, by longing for it, have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs." Specifically, in the situation that James was referring to in this letter, the poor had no recourse in that society to call for justice in the courts, but the rich were able to file complaints against the poor, and often the rich took advantage of the poor. And James is saying that a poor person certainly will not do that to you, but if anyone does do that to you, it'll be the rich, because the poor can't do that to you. And so the question might come to mind because of James's comments, is it evil then to make a lot of money? And the answer to that is no. I mean, God prospers people so that they can give to the poor. And the fact that people are starving all over the world is not because God isn't supplying money or food. It's because of the fact that God has supplied both money and food through his people around the world, but they aren't releasing it. The attitude we should have toward wealth was expressed by Paul in Philippians 4, verses 12 and 13. He said, "I know how to get along with humble means, and I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. We often quote that verse, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, but he's talking about it in relation to our finances, whether we are in need or whether we are in abundance. He's saying that no matter if you're rich or poor, this person realizes that their source and their dependence is Jesus Christ, and that's where ours needs to be. You think about that. I look forward to seeing you next time as we study the Bible, phrase by phrase.